So yeah, there's a lot to get through, so I hope you'll indulge me to get through it, and it's fairly full on topic. But let's dive straight in. And we're all probably aware, I'm assuming there may be some who are not aware of necessarily these events outlined in Revelation, but if that's unclear or a surprise, certainly see me or one of the elders afterwards. But we're aware that there's a time coming when the commandment keepers will be persecuted with being barred from buying and selling, and ultimately hunted to death, and that the key issue at that time is going to revolve around worship, and specifically the worship on God's seventh-day Sabbath. Now, with that said, a simple question: does this, and maybe an obvious question, does this scenario involve malicious and evil actors? Well, obviously it does, but the next question is, are these evil and malicious actors active as we speak, right here and now, or are they just going to pop up somewhere at this closing scenario? It might be perhaps easy to think, or lapse into thinking, that in this time of relative freedom and ease, that there's not a lot going on, that it's all some future problem. But we know that there's been a war waged by Satan against God's people ever since Eden, and it's just manifested in different forms in different periods of time. And what we're talking about here, what's described in Revelation 13, is just the final act in the drama, as Mrs. White puts it. But before we go there into the future, I just want to take a step back into the Roman era, into the time of Christ and the early church. And I want to do that especially because many of the attributes of the beast of Revelation, or well, I should say the Roman beast power, still feature heavily in the beast power at the end of time. And this is how A.T. Jones, Adventist historian, describes the stance of the Roman Empire on religion. And there it is there. Firstly, no man shall have for himself particular gods of his own. No man shall worship by himself any new or foreign gods, unless they are recognized by the public laws. Number 2, worship the gods in all respects according to the laws of your country, and compel all others to do the same, but hate and punish those who would introduce anything whatever alien to our customs in this particular. And number 3, whoever introduces new religions, the tendency and character of which are unknown, whereby the minds of men may be disturbed, shall, if belonging to the higher rank, be banished, if to the lower, punished with death. So even then, you could only worship their deities according to the groupthink the authorities allowed you to have. And Christians, you could understand, with a new God, a new religion, had nowhere to turn. They were surrounded. They were surrounded spiritually, and they were also surrounded literally when the Roman armies besieged Jerusalem, as Jesus had forewarned his followers would happen. But when you see Jerusalem, Jesus says, surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. And there are several references in Daniel make clear that this abomination of desolation would continue in one form or another right through to the end of time. And we know that in Revelation 13 the issue is about worship, because the image of the beast will speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And we further know from Revelation that financial transactions will be used as a control mechanism to effect submission, with ultimately death penalties attached. For no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So I ask this: how close are we to being surrounded by the principles of the Roman Empire, applied to our time, applied to the issue of freedom to worship and to live our religion according to conscience? And now we know that if you're going to dictate how men may worship, in order not to get laughed out of town, you have to have society view that particular way of life and that form of worship as a threat to society. So it's accepted by all, or by at least the majority. And controlling buying and selling is simply one means to force those recalcitrants who can't be enticed to go along with the accepted dogmas, which are all purported to be for the common good. And in order to control whether you can buy or sell, you need to control the ability of people to either earn money or to control how they can use money, or both. And since the scripture speaks of a worldwide power, this needs ultimately to be globally coordinated. Something like a new world order, perhaps. Well, conspiracy theory, perhaps. Let's just play this one. Thanks.
And the title of this session, are we ready for a new world order?
So that was the World Government Summit, as you can see there, from just last year. So they make no bones about the fact that we're gearing up for a new world order. So it's not my conspiratorial words, it's theirs. We've just one more clip there. It might need a bit of extra volume if I remember correctly. It's a bit quiet. So let's play the next one.
So, most important summit, because it's looking at all aspects of government, and we are also looking at the future. For example, this morning when the topic was on the New World Order, this is something that will touch everybody, and we should all be involved in it, because whether we like it or not, the New World Order will dictate how things go.
Right, so there are groups of elites, government, non-government officials that are actively planning this new world order. And foremost amongst them is Klaus Schwab, the leader of the World Economic Forum. And let's just hear a little of his modus operandi. Thanks.
And I have to say, when I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, is that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
And that's true in Argentina too. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's true in Argentina as well.
It's true in Argentina, and it's true in France now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with the president, with a young global leader.
So we can see that these global billionaire elites are basically installing their people in governments and cabinets all around the world. And that modus operandi bears an uncanny resemblance to the modus operandi of Jesuits. And this is from that article you can see there, which tells us that the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, has been an international organisation with men placed among the powerful, and a founder who said we should be trying to influence the influential. Conspiracy theories about the Jesuits trying to rule the world kept popping up because what we were doing looked a lot like that. And when you get right down to it, what makes us so sure there wasn't some truth in what they were saying? Well, I would say there'd be complete truth in what they were saying, because we know that right from their inception, the Jesuit order was founded with the sole aim of reinstating the Pope as the ruler of the world. And I might just remind us all that both the Pope and Klaus Schwab of World Economic Forum, who you just heard, they cite the very same socialist Jesuit father as one of the most influential people in their thinking and career, Domhelder Camara, if you wanted to know his name. So not surprising, there's very close alignment between the way they operate. So, World Economic Forum, what sort of future do they envisage? Well, here we go. Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, I have no privacy. Life has never been better. You will own nothing and you'll be happy. So who's going to own everything? Well, we'll just subscribe to them, and I guess it's the global elites and the mega, multinational corporations will own everything and provide us with the crumbs that we need to survive. Basically, our right for individual property and ownership is going to be forfeited, and we'll subscribe to them. And this has been described by some as modern form of serfdom, or I might say slavery. Now, this is actually quite reminiscent of Catholic social teaching. There we are, the Pope saying that private property is not Christian. World Economic Forum, surprise, surprise, agrees with that. In November 2020, Pope Francis declared that private ownership is not something obvious in Christianity. Let us admit that the Christian tradition has never recognised the right to private property as absolute and immovable, said Francis. Sorry, just check my slides there. Yep. And so what kind of future is the World Economic Forum envisaging for us? Let's just have a look at this next clip, which would give us some sort of inkling. Thanks.
Again, I think that the biggest question maybe in economics and politics of the coming decades will be what to do with all these useless people. The problem is more boredom, and what to do with them, and how will they find some sense of meaning in life when they are basically meaningless, worthless. My best guess at present is a combination of drugs and computer games.
So we can see that we basically won't own anything because the ruling elites will own everything. We'll actually be totally redundant, as he's mentioning there, because we'll all be replaced by AI in the hands of the globalist elites. We'll most likely all be a burden on society and on the planet. And if we're lucky, they might give us some drugs and give us computer games and something to eat, like bugs. So here we go. This is another one of their bright ideas, why we might be all eating insects soon. Good for the planet, they say. So now you might say, look, you're all dreaming. They're all dreaming. They don't control it. They're just doing their best to predict what's the future of the world. Well, and they can't actually shape what happens. Not according to them. Let's just listen to this clip.
Let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the states of the world.
Right, so they're going to change the world, they're going to save the world according to them. And that's a sentiment fairly closely echoed by the Pope. You notice there it says prepare the future, not prepare for the future. And okay, let's say that these globalist elites are seeking total control of the masses that will own nothing, get video games, drugs and bugs. Well, what would you need? You would need to bring people and society as we know it to be brought to complete ruin through a series of crises in order to usher in a new state of things. Something like a Great Reset, which is the name of Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset, and actually linked to the COVID-19 crisis, the Great Reset. And we've seen our fair share of crises. I mean, we've had the health crisis, obviously, with the pandemic. There's been natural disasters plenty in various countries around the world, earthquakes, heat waves, floods, droughts and famines. There's been energy crises, there's been blackouts, grid instability, sabotage, cyber attacks, security breaches, wars and sectarian clashes. And then we've got food crises. And, there's COVID-19, the Great Reset. There's food shortages, and plenty of voices and experts around the world are sounding the forebodings about how our food crisis how bad it will be, how previously it would be about the lack of access to food, but the next one will be the lack of food altogether. And more headlines there about the perfect storm for the food supply and the food supply chain. Then you've got things like the cost of living crisis, inflation spiralling out of control, people are homeless, people are desperate. But in spite of all of that, it's not just the crisis themselves that we should be concerned about, but also some of the measures that are spawned in the wake of the crisis that are being imposed upon us to impact our freedoms, our personal choices, or our societal choices. And just as we saw these far-reaching controls, measures in response to the pandemic, now there are looming many additional control measures, all in the name of climate change. But before we delve into some of them, just want to consider for a moment that the climate change narrative is assuming a very, very religious overtone. And we're already familiar with the climate's dogmas from which your opinions may not deviate. And so here we have the Vatican offering the moral support to the UN Treaty on Climate Change. We've got the World Council of Churches supporting the ecocide law, where if you do anything that is deemed to be against the environment, you are a criminal. What are churches doing involved with that, I ask? The Jesuits urging carbon tax to, tax polluters, so-called, carbon pricing, backed there by the Pope. And some of these things are all assuming quite a bit of religious zeal. And here we've got, this was last year, the religious leaders gathering in Mount Sinai, of all places, to receive the Climate 10 Commandments, Climate Justice 10 Commandments. And then you've got this wonderful piece of overreach where Switzerland considers jailing people who heat their rooms above 19 degrees. And that was an if. It was, I understand, never actually came to fruition, but the fact that it was even debated or raised is quite a concern to me. And so we can expect more and more of this type of overreach into every facet of our lives. Then you've got things like the control of information. All right, sorry, that's just another one on the climate thing, getting locked out of accessing your thermostat in your own home because you might use too much electricity and energy. And then you've got the control of information and what you can see and read. The UN is censoring climate skeptics in partnership with Google, and they're claiming there that they own the science. In other words, you can't think anything but what we tell you to. The World Economic Forum's meeting focusing on countering misinformation. And then you've got, surprise, surprise, the Pope weighing in on things, joining forces with Microsoft and big tech there to create a doctrine for ethical AI, and the Vatican wanting to shape AI, which will in turn shape how we live our lives. And yeah, I think ethical and Pope in the same sentence raises some eyebrows to me. But anyway, then you've got things like the surveillance, which is ramping up. And this is just one example. A mother of a Girl Scout went to go to a show with her family. She got kicked out after facial recognition recognised her. And the reason was that she was a lawyer and her company, not even her, was involved in a lawsuit against that venue. And she wasn't supposed to be there, apparently. But it was just an example of how easily we can be surveilled, identified, and it's being used more and more. And in fact, the FBI, spies on its own citizens there in the States, and tracking us without our consent, of course. We've even got the CDC, revealing they were tracking unvaccinated people and what they do in the health system. And then you've got things like the social credit, right? We all think about China when we think of social credit, but now we start to see it potentially coming into Western countries, such as this one in Italy, where they will basically reward your good climate behaviour. And linked to that, we have our carbon footprint is going to be tracked now, and we've already got the Commonwealth Bank, and I don't know if anybody here has Commonwealth Bank app on their phone, but it's starting to give you your carbon footprint, and there's other financial institutions around the world that are doing this as well. And it's all in the name of being a good global citizen, of course, but I ask how long before it stops being a carrot and starts being a stick. Well, here's a clue. There was a MasterCard announcing a credit card with a carbon emissions limit. So, as you can see there, instead of reaching a monetary limit, you reach a carbon limit, and then, sorry, that's it. You know, so then you've got things like climate lockdowns. There's this concept of 15-minute cities, which is being pushed in various countries around the world, where everything you supposedly need will be a 15-minute walk away. And the push is to do away with cars. And this was a trial in Oxfordshire County in the UK. Residents are going to be confined to one of 6 zones to save the planet from global warming, and they'll need permission to leave their zone. Cars will be monitored, and electronic gates on the key roads in and out of the city are planned. And under those new proposals, if any of the Oxford's 150,000 residents drives outside of their designated district more than 100 days a year, he or she could be fined. And then you've got Paris planning a car ban for some time next year. We've got the International Energy Agency calling for car-free Sundays. You've got car-free Sundays in Albania. And I don't know if you noticed there, but why does it always seem to be a Sunday that has to be the car-free day? Curious? And now in the middle of this food crisis that is brewing, we've got this. We've got the Great Reset in full force, where farmers in Netherlands are being forced to shut their farms because they're using too much nitrogen, according to these new goalposts that has been foisted upon them. And the government is basically threatening to seize and close 3,000 farms in order to comply with these new goalposts. So farmers would be offered more than 100% of the value of their farms to quit. And for the first time, the government has said that forced buyouts will follow next year if the voluntary measures fail. So close your farm. If you don't sell it to us, we're just going to close it forcefully anyway. And further to that, I have understood that these farmers can't just pack up and go somewhere else. If they are bought out by the government and forcefully closed, they'll be banned from farming anywhere else in the European Union. Then you've got the Sri Lanka crisis, which you might remember from last year, I believe, where the crisis was basically brought about by an overzealous environmental target and collapsed their agricultural sector. And moving right along, we now look at the financial sector, and I'm sure you've all heard of this, but the digital currencies are picking up pace all around the world, and particularly in the US, we've got Biden basically tasked basically wanted to have a clear path forward for a digital currency for the US by October last year. And what we've got now is the CBDC, the groundwork for the CBDC already in place in the US, called the FedNow Instant Payment System. Just a comment under this particular article there is the digital dollars that they're talking about is programmable, so it can be used to control your purchases, such as fossil fuel use, restrict you to spend at particular businesses, and basically to redistribute wealth. And one of the things that is talked about is having an expiry date on your currency. So if you get your current dollars, you can do whatever you want with them and stick them in the bank and save them up as long as you want. But there's talk of, for instance, in the UK with the Britcoin in probably 2025, that there might be limits on how much you can actually hold of it. So you might be able to save £20,000 and that's it. Or they might put an expiry on it, so you've got to spend it. Don't spend it, it's all gone and vaporized into thin air. And once again, you can imagine that this ties back into this concept of taking away your right to own property of any significance or amass any wealth. So this is the FedNow system already in place. This is slightly an old slide, so apologies for that. Things are changing so quickly. So the FedNow system up and running. And let's just have a listen to this clip. This is about how the financial sector is on the brink of a big shake-up. Thanks.
What underpins a world order is always the financial system. And what we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy.
Yeah, and if we move into the next clip as well, this is the head of the Bank of International Settlements, so it's kind of the central bank of the central banks around the world. Just listen to how he describes, why they need to know how you use your money. Thanks. This might need a bit of volume as well.
For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Therefore, the degree of control will be far bigger.
So why do they need a CBDC? Control, and the means to enforce their rules. Let's just go straight into this next video clip. Thanks.
And the reality, as the financial system gets more controlling and more invasive, it's a little bit like bringing up a corral around us. And CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and vaccine passports or digital IDs are sort of the last shutting of the gate. It's hard for many people to imagine the risks here because we're so used to living with financial transaction freedom, and we don't understand that when this gate closes on us, we literally will be sitting in a system where the central banks believe that our assets belong to them, and they can dictate where we can spend money and what we can spend money on. The important thing to understand is central bank digital currencies are not currencies. It's a financial transaction control grid, and it gives the ability for the central bankers, and they've said this publicly, the ability to not only set the rules centrally, but enforce the rules centrally. If you don't behave, you can have your money turned off.
Right, which is the crux of the matter, isn't it? And you lose your freedoms unless you go along with the groupthink from the authorities. Now, so perhaps, in the near future, it'll never be more true that, as Henry Kissinger said, he controls the food supply, controls the people, who controls the energy, controls the whole continent, who controls money can control the world. So top all that off with, well, potentially discarding the US Constitution, which has been the most pivotal safeguard against the tyranny that results from the combination of religion and politics. You can see here that there is a push in the US for a constitutional convention, in other words, to do away with the supposedly archaic constitution and rewrite it as something which is more suitable for our times. And, you know, if you can pull that off, you've just perfectly paved the way for persecution. Anybody who sits outside the authorities' narrative of the day. So back to Jerusalem. The last day's equivalent of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 is the surrounding of God's people with legislation that forces them to break God's commandments, and specifically the Sabbath commandment. And in the first century AD, the Christians got their warning of all of this when in 66 AD, 3.5 years earlier, Cestius besieged Jerusalem. And when it seemed that they would succeed, he suddenly retreated. And that was the window of opportunity for the followers of Christ needed to action his directive, to flee to the mountains. And as a result, not one Christian perished in the final destruction of Jerusalem. So I ask, how close are we to being surrounded with armies, finally and once and for all? Well, I put it to you that we've already received our warning as Adventists, because in 1888, the US came perilously close to actually passing a national Sunday law. It was put forward by Senator Blair, and it got to the stage where the Seventh-day Baptists and also the Jews conceded their objections to it, and it looked like the law was set to pass. But Adventist historian Alonzo T. Jones, A.T. Jones, he contended strongly for religious freedom as enshrined in the Constitution, and ultimately his protest with petitions from Seventh-day Adventists was pivotal in seeing the bill ultimately defeated. But just as when in the second siege of Jerusalem in AD 70 it was too late to escape, so in our day when the papal armies, in other words the first and second beasts of Revelation 13, when they return, they won't be retreating. And if we haven't made our escape or preparation, it may just be too late. And we're right on the verge of this final crisis. So the question is, how do we prepare for all of this? Well, one aspect, and that's a very practical one, is establishing ourselves in the country. And we're told this, that again and again the Lord has instructed our people to take their families away from the cities into the country, where they can raise their own provisions, for in the future the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. We should now begin to heed the instruction given us over and over again: get out of the cities into rural districts. And this obviously being penned, over a century ago. And now, that doesn't happen by snapping our fingers, of course. It takes time, and I believe it's well past time that we as a people took this counsel seriously and put it into action. And not to mention the fact that at some point we won't even be able to leave the cities if we feel like it. Because we're told here that ere long there will be such strife and confusion in the cities that those who wish to leave them will not be able. We must be preparing for these issues. This is the light that is given me. I mean, COVID lockdowns, anybody? Melbourne, couldn't go 5 kilometres past your house. New York City, surrounded by armed guards. So we don't want to be put in a position where we might be forced to make a wrong decision, a spiritual decision. And that's, I believe, one of the key issues that the Lord is trying to save us from. Remember Lot's wife, Jesus said. Lot and his family were so accustomed to the luxuries of city life, it was a difficult thing for her to wrench herself away, and ultimately she made the wrong decision. We're told that human laws will be made so stringent that men and women will not dare to observe the seventh-day Sabbath. For fear of wanting food and clothing, they will join with the world in transgressing God's law. This is what God is trying to do by giving us this inside intelligence as to what's coming, so that we can take heed and prepare and be ready for it. If our people regard God's instruction as of value, they will move away from the city. Those who choose to remain in the city surrounded by the houses of unbelievers must share the disaster that will come upon them. Sobering words. So I appeal to all of us, and myself included, with the blessings of the inside information that we've had, to take it seriously, to pray that the Lord will open the way for us. And for those that presently have the means to put it into place, to assist people who are trying and may not have the means. And furthermore, it's not just that, it's being ready personally to plead with the Lord to show us where we are in our spiritual walk, to show us our own heart, what needs to be surrendered to him fully and completely, what needs to be repented of, so that we can be right with God every single day, regardless of what happens in the future, and to be right also with our fellow man, so that there's nothing that will stand against us in the day of judgment. Time is almost finished, we're told. Do you reflect the lovely image of Jesus as you should? Said the angel, get ready, get ready, get ready. You will have to die a greater death to the world than you have ever yet died. I saw that there was a great work for them, but little time in which to do it. And certainly we can see that time is winding down. Things are speeding up as we look at the world around us. Lastly, I would appeal to each of us to spend time asking the Lord for opportunities to share truth. It's not just for our own benefit, it's for enlightening so many who might be in darkness at this point in time. And the Lord delights in answering those prayers, amen. So I ask us, how will you stand? How will I stand? Will we yield to the combined forces of darkness for the sake of convenience, or to avoid ridicule, or to put food in our tummies? Or will we be with the remnant saints, steadfastly keeping the commandments of God no matter what, who would rather die than sin and deny our God? Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Now, sometimes it can all be too daunting to think about what's happening. But I want to leave you with this thought. We can take heart in the strength and the faithfulness of the Lord. Because he has set his love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high because he has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honour him. So it's God's job, remember? It's God's job to deliver us, to sustain us. It's our job to set our love upon him and hearken to every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So now more than ever we can see that the Lord is coming quickly. His reward is with him. We are nearly home, and he's going to give to everyone according to his work. So may we all be found faithful. May we all be prepared. May we all be closer to the Lord every day than the day before. Maranatha.